Infrastructure, we asked for some things. What we asked was just a fair shake. That we don't play favorites or pick winners. Allow those companies to pick winners when someone's going out and using these services. That's a critical thing. I've heard criticism for that argument, saying that, well, we can trust these companies not to do it. But just yesterday, there was another article. You know all about the firefighters. I'm sure everybody's heard that they were throttling the firefighters while they were fighting the fires. This was Verizon, again, Ajit Pay's former employer, who was throttling those folks. So over at FCC, he's made changes that were beneficial to them. But we've seen a lot of cases of this. Northeastern University and University of Massachusetts at Amherst just released a study where they loaded applications on 100,000 consumers' devices and measured the throttling that was going on. Verizon had 11,000 instances just in the short period they measured. AT&T 8,398. It just went on and on. And these weren't them just shaping traffic. This was picking one application to get better bandwidth than another one. So competing applications to properties that their parent companies owned were throttled, and that started to happen. And I don't want to take too long here, but I'll wrap up my piece of this just to say, if we don't think about the consequences of that and how they impact Congressman Thornberry himself, let's think about just the impact here. We've handed the keys over to somebody else. You're allowing somebody else to decide what gets fast bandwidth, what gets slow bandwidth. And as long as you think that a friend holds those keys, you're not as worried. But remember, Suddenlink, which serves most of the constituents and most of Congressman Thornberry's constituents, many people in Texas have no other choice but Suddenlink for their high-speed internet, was acquired by a European company called Altis in 2015. If they decide they don't like a particular policy or don't like a particular representative, that they want to change our politics, all they have to do is start to manipulate that traffic so that one politician's website loads faster than the other, or stories about one load faster than the other. That's entirely possible. I could do that myself if I needed. I understand the technology that would be possible to do that. So that's a critically dangerous thing, and it's not even illegal at this moment, because we don't have those net neutrality protections there. They're not treated as a telecom. They're not treated, there's no regulation sitting on top of it, and we really need Congressman Thornberry to sign this discharge petition to allow the Congressional Review Act resolution to reverse the FCC's net neutrality repeal. I think that's the only short-term remedy that's going to be acceptable, at least in my perspective. And I know other people will have different ones, but that's my perspective, is that's the only thing that I think is going to help us right now. Anything else is a long-term fix that's worth discussion. But, I'll yield the floor here.
Come on, my name is Jerry Glover. I am a Texas licensed realtor and a Texas licensed auctioneer. I also have lived and worked all over the globe. I spent 10 years as a government civilian with the Air Force, and I know how important technology is, not only to our individual lives, but also to our military and our fighting men and women. And us not being able to have open internet and net neutrality could just as easily affect them as they could Congressman Thornberry, as you just heard Bill talk about. I'm going to go a little bit personal and selfish for my story, though, and talk about my requirements as a realtor and a Texas licensed auctioneer. Coming up on my second year as a realtor, I'm required to perform 98 hours of continuing education in order to maintain my license. They do not offer 98 hours of continuing education in Amarillo, Texas for realtors. So I am dependent upon the internet for that sort of activity, to be able to attend classes online, to watch videos online, to attend conferences in order to be able to just maintain my license. The same is true for my auctioneer's license. I'm required to do almost 20 hours of continuing education every year for my auctioneer's license. If I do not have the resources or the time to attend the Texas Auctioneer Conference, the National Auctioneer Conference, or some other conference that's offered, requiring me to travel, spend the money to stay in hotels, etc., then I am again relying on video for my continuing education in order to maintain my license. Every offer I submit as a real estate agent, every offer that I receive as a real estate agent, is dependent upon the internet to be able to complete those contracts per my license regulations, and to be able to get digital signatures for my clients who may or may not live in Amarillo. Oftentimes they don't. The seller or the buyer one is living long distance, and I require the digital signatures. And if we're allowing other people to decide how important my livelihood is, then that directly impacts my family, my ability to earn money, and likewise for the same is true for all 900 plus realtors here in Amarillo. And I know Congressman Thornberry has a good relationship with the realtors in Amarillo. He frequently hosts them in his home when they come up for conferences and for various events there in the DC and Virginia area. And so I think it's something that he needs to consider, is that this decision directly impacts these people whom he has said he supports and who support him. So that is why I am asking him to sign this petition, and let's walk this back. Just because it's the suit du jour to undo policies that were put in place by someone else does not mean that Congressman Thornberry needs to eat from that buffet. He should be able to make his own decisions as our representative. Thank you.
And sir, my name is Kobe Jackson. I'm a remote field tech for a nationwide company. I've also done a lot of contracts for BSA, which is Baptist St. Anthony's, one of the nationally recognized hospitals in the area. I've been in tech for over 20 years. To start out with, people are selfish on most levels, but I do want to kind of approach things that can affect Congressman Thornberry's campaign itself with net neutrality. I'm going to cover about 7 different instances, such as another constituent just did. But when we talk about net neutrality, most people don't understand what's happening tech-wise. Basically, everything in this country comes from a third-level provider for internet. What that means is, even if you've got Suddenlink, you've got Comcast, you've got NTS, you live in a rural area with wireless internet, that's coming from a higher tier provider such as AT&T, Verizon, NTS. Whenever they see keywords or server addresses that might be a competing service, and there's been plenty of instances of this already, they will slow that traffic to where it is almost in an unusable state. To put this in perspective, this might be something against Thornberry's beliefs, but the analogy is still relative here. Back in 2007, Verizon actually blocked a pro-choice campaign that a political group was running. They blocked their text messages that were allowing them to gather campaign funds and such. And the reason I bring this up is because even if that's against the congressman's beliefs, I want him to put that in perspective of, if you get on the wrong side on any issue, that these companies can block you via text, via internet. Now, the way your campaign conducts itself as a remote unit. Right now, we're using it via teleconferencing. People use Cisco, Skype. There's already been plenty of instances where AT&T, 2 years in a row, 2007 through 2009, AT&T forced Apple to block Skype and other VoIP apps. Now, when I say VoIP, that's voice over IP. That's part of the services that a lot of people who can't afford their phone bill every month or just need to, like your campaign does, I'm pointing to somebody like that there, like your campaign does, that's how you stay in contact. And depending on which provider you might be riding on at the moment, whether it's AT&T or it hands off to a Verizon line in one way or another, they can block those services. They can destroy your campaign without you being able to prove it, unless you're a network level engineer who has access to those resource materials. Innovation wise, we've already seen services that AT&T, Sprint, and Verizon, and this is not a joke, they had a payment service called ISIS, that competed with Google Wallet, which AT&T, Sprint, and Verizon all had a stake in the development of this payment service. Well, all three blocked Google Wallet, which might not sound like a big deal, but I'd like you to look at how much this will be hindering competition because you can block the little man. And just looking across here, I can keep going and going, but the main thing is I worked for a local telco by the name of AMA TechTel, who received government subsidies for expanding rural networking. Your stance is that you're worried that it's going to hinder, net neutrality will actually hinder that development to these rural communities. It's quite the opposite. You've got multiple people on the tech side that I'd really push you to talk to about this. The company I work for put their time and effort into these rural communities because it was A, profitable, and B, it provided VoIP services to especially customers who are elderly, don't have good phone service, especially cell reception. These wireless internet services that are riding off the big boys already could be hindered at any time at their whim. These net neutrality rules were put in place to begin to level the playing field and provide a safeguard for our elderly, for everybody. And if you want a good example of that, I'd ask you to look into, give just a moment to refer to one of my last notes here. In 2007 to 2009, Verizon once again blocked access to all third-party GPS applications.